Yeah, so yeah, I guess we're good to go. How delightful. I'm just kind of double checking all my stuff. I think we're good. I think it's okay. I think so far so good. So, yeah, doing great. Let's let's get this thing started, shall we?
And now we'll see how good you are.
No matter what anybody tells you, words and ideas can change the world.
Ready to work.
So, I'm in kind of this I don't really know what to call it. This kind of mood today. This general maybe it's the weather, maybe it's I'm just tired, maybe I'm distracted. I don't know. I've been in a mood, and it's really had me thinking all day about how to talk about this stuff tonight. It's not necessarily a bad topic, it's a really good topic. It's an important topic. But I've been very conscious of how to get these things across and how to separate the more abstract parts of it from the more concrete parts of it. Because, and I was really surprised by this, there isn't just one answer. There isn't just one clear way to do this. As I forgot one button. Hang on one second. Okay. Where this came from, where this started was, well, I think as far back as I've ever talked to writers, there's always been this issue, this element, this thing, this problem, this challenge when it comes to writers and characters. Good evening. Hello. Hi. How are you? It's nice to see all of you. I completely spaced out. Hi. We should do an intro. We should say hello. So hello. If this is the first time you're watching this, the first time you're checking it out, my name's John. Hi. I'm me. I help writers tell their stories in my very well polished, highly practiced intro. All the same, though, I've been thinking, and if you'll bear with a few pauses tonight as I further assemble these thoughts, in going through this material, it's hard for me to divide the abstract side from the practical side, and I'm generally somebody who leans on that practical side. I'm not entirely sure why. It's just that's how it seems to be coming out. So, if you'll indulge me a bit, we'll cover the abstract side and we'll do the practical side. Because this topic tonight, which, by the way, is right there, your character doesn't need to be perfect. This topic tonight is born, I think, not only out of a general frustration I can speak to in publishing from a publishing person to a writer, but also from writers to readers and writers to consumers. We all sort of struggle with this in our own ways, and I want to talk about that too. There's so many more parts to this than just a really simple, like, hey, I need you to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. And that's, I mean, there are a few things I can give you, but that'll come later. But for now, this is really just, I hate to say this, but this is as much an instructional as it is a motivational. This is as much me sorting out what to say as it is you figuring out how to apply this to you. So if you will forgive an absence of eye contact, because I normally, 9 times out of 10, I'm pacing around having these thoughts. But since I was literally having these thoughts, like to the point where I almost missed the 7 o'clock start time, you get to sit here with me, and I don't know if this is going to do well, if this is going to do poorly. I also don't kind of care. But at the same time, there's a lot of moving parts here, so I'd like to break them down. First and foremost, we need to talk about the general idea of creativity and what it means. Because there's a big misunderstanding that happens like a huge, giant misunderstanding that writers experience and express when it comes to creating things and when it comes to building things. And it's not just a matter of lacking information or lacking good instruction. It comes down to a fundamental misunderstanding of what it is they're supposed to be doing and why they're supposed to be doing it. We are sorcerers. We make things up. We craft ideas from electricity and chemicals in our brains, and they get turned into stories that other people can interpret through language or visuals or content, and then are able to imagine them as well. That's magic. There's no real other way to describe that. And while that sounds very abstract and very metaphysical, and I guess to some degree it is slightly metaphysical, it also speaks to me in terms of a general responsibility and a need for writers to do that well. Because nothing is worse at a birthday party than a crappy magician. Well, maybe bad cake. But like bad, and I don't mean like evil bad, I mean like poorly skilled does not a good magician make. And likewise, poorly crafted and poorly skilled writers do not good stories produce. You have a responsibility as a writer, writing whatever it is you're writing. I don't care if it's a romance novel, a fantasy novel, a pirate epic, a legal thriller. Doesn't matter to me. Kids book, picture book, whatever. You have a responsibility to produce your work to the best of your ability, period. I will hear no kind of sort of maybes, ifs about it. This is your job. You signed up for this job. You want to do this job. Now, the distinction we make at that first threshold is I'm making this for me, and I don't really care. I'm not going to publish it. I don't need to be a published author. I'm just telling a story. And some people watching this, will fall on that side of the divide, and more power to you. Have a great time. Enjoy yourself. Tell the best story you want. Make yourself happy. Good for you. But now we're going to cross that divide, right? When we cross that divide, all of a sudden now we're taking our stories, which we are making for ourselves. That doesn't change. But now we are going to start making them outward facing. We're going to send them out there into the world beyond the door of the room we write in, out into the world. And now maybe we walk a path towards getting them traditionally published. Maybe we publish them ourselves. That avenue doesn't change anything. It's just which hallway do we walk down once we go out that door. The fact remains the same, though. You are a sorcerer. You are creating this from nothing. You have a responsibility to do it to the best of your ability. And it's not easy. It's less easy. Big giant thunder. It's less easy aiming out the door and trying to get other people involved than it was just for you, because when it was for you, you only had yourself to deal with. You only had yourself to answer to. You only had yourself to think about. You were just telling a story, and whatever it is whatever it is. And that was fine. And if it didn't work, it didn't really matter. It didn't really count, because at the end of the day, you were just writing, and you had no design for it past that. But now we go out that door, you have to have a design. You have to know what to do. You have to know what the next steps are. And the same tricks and skills and skims and skips and cheats and shortcuts you took when it didn't matter, when it was just you writing for you, you keep doing those same things. You take all those little shortcuts thinking it's okay. When you go out that door, you are not going to get the results that you want. No, that's just not how that works. You have, in addition to the responsibility of crafting work that is, beneficial and provocative for others, you now have an additional responsibility, the additional responsibility of making something you're proud of that matters, that moves people, that affects people. It isn't just, I'm doing this, whatever, and it's just for me, no big deal. Now it's, I'm putting this into the world. And if you're the sort of writer, if you're the sort of creative who is okay with having shortcuts and crutches and shields and laziness and inarticulate work and slapdash production come as part of the structure, if you're okay with with taking the short way out rather than the long way, because the long way seems hard. If you're okay racing to the end goal because you don't want to be bothered to give a shit, then you will get the results you deserve, not necessarily the results you want. Because writing fundamentally is a massively generative act. You're producing something from nothing. You are producing something that has not only the ability, but I believe the responsibility to move other people. The same way that you, when you consume other people's material, you are moved. That, to me, is the metric for a good piece of art. Does it move me? How? That's variable and depending on the art. But the thing you make should move someone. And I don't mean move them like move their hand to their wallet, because I've seen that shit online today. But it should affect them. It should resonate with them. It should click with them. It should help them feel something that perhaps they didn't know how to articulate otherwise. You have the ability to transcend and overcome and go beyond boundaries and borders and limitations you never thought twice about. But that means you're going to have to do the work. That means that you have to be willing to question your assumptions. That means you have to be willing to work harder and try more and be willing to, push your own buttons in order to get this idea across. And for a lot of people, it's easy to cross that first threshold and go, I want to be a published author. But it's a hell of a lot more, if not impossible, for them to go to that second threshold and go, I'm creating art. I want to create something that moves someone. And I think it's in response to that second threshold, knowing that it's there, edging right up to the looking over the line, coming right up, toes up to the edge of it. I think that's where you start to see all these different kinds of things we're going to talk about tonight. Because I work with a lot of writers. I believe that about 90% of them will, if they continue their current trajectory, they'll get published. I think 100% of them can get published if they're willing to push past where they are. But I think a lot of them, if they just stay their current course, they'll do okay. I wish more of them didn't want to just do okay. I wish they could believe in themselves. I wish they could see that they have the potential to make something that moves somebody. It's not going to be easy. It's certainly not going to be your first draft. It's not going to be your first idea. It might not even be the fifth draft of this book. It might be 2 books from now. It might be 10 years from now. But you have the ability, you have the capacity, you have the innate skill, once developed, once practiced, to move someone. It's not necessarily a purely commercial thing. We're not producing widgets at the factory. We're not trying to just churn out, 10,000 units we can sell off the table in the back corner. We're looking to produce art, which means that this art has something to it beyond just what's the word I want to use? Beyond just beyond the sense of, this is $2.99 worth of stuff. It can be $2, it can be $3, it can be $90 million, doesn't matter. It's the idea that you're making a thing and you should give a shit about it. Because writing fundamentally is an act of pushing yourself and having something to say and having something to do. It's hard. It matters. It's skill. It's art. And it's like that for a reason. As my camera goes berserk with the focus. I'm so sorry for moving so quickly. What I'm bringing up, what I'm talking about, this whole idea, where does this come from? Where's my graphic? Right there, that graphic. Where does that graphic come from? This whole idea of just misunderstanding and mistaking the idea of perfection for perfectionism, and the idea of quality being limited to commercial success, commerce, the exchange of money, capitalism, our most ancient of foes. These things all swirl and pile together when all of a sudden, like a knock at the door from somebody you don't want to talk to, everything feels invaded and unsafe when the art stops being just art and it starts becoming this product and this commodity and this thing. And as much as I want to tell you to rage against the machine, as much as I want to tell you that, hey, like, money is fake and we made it all up and all these systems are stupid and trust no one who advocates for that system, just burn them all to the ground and then stomp on the ashes. As much as I want to tell you to do that, this is not that time. This is a time for reckoning with yourself. And I don't mean that in like some big dramatic way. It's just that's the clearest word I could think of. You need to be able to confront yourself as an artist and figure out what it is you're producing and why it is you're producing it. And if your first response is, I need money, there are like a bajillion other ways to make a better living. And if you're going to commit to this and you're going to sign on for this and you're going to go with this, then you got to understand what you're getting into. And you got to understand that for as difficult as it is to be imaginative and for as difficult as it is to plot these things out and learn the rigors of character development and plot and pacing and theme and climax and all the nuts and bolts and bells and whistles, there's just as much, if not more, internal stuff to you. Where's my big camera? Stuff to you in here that you have to grapple with. And we've talked about this elsewhere, and we've talked about this before, that whole idea of like, you got to put your ass in the seat, and you got to sit down and write, and it's not going to write itself, and you don't need big fancy degrees, and you don't need to hyper plan everything. At some point, you got to put your ass in the chair and your fingers on the keys, and you got to make the story happen, and it's either going to happen or it's not going to happen. And then you have to show up on the days you don't want to show up, and you got to do the work when you don't want to. When you'd much rather be playing a game or much rather hanging out with your friends or much rather watching TV or much rather doing whatever. Sometimes you got to show up and put your work first because you want to put your goal first because you're choosing to put yourself first. That's not a sign of selfishness or arrogance. That's a sign of I'm making a thing and it takes time to make things. But you also have to deal with the sense of rejection, the sense of judgment. You take this idea, you hand it to somebody else, and all of a sudden, like, oh, who knows what they'll say? Who knows what they'll do? Who knows how they'll respond? That freaks people the hell out. That's what prevents them from really absolutely positively grappling with things. Oh, I can't finish this. I have more. I have, there should be another draft. There should be another thing. Oh my God. Oh, I need more paper. I need better pens. I need better software. Oh, I could rewrite it like this. They excuses spawn like dust motes in a grandma's closet. Like they're just everywhere. Why? Because people are trying to grapple with that fear. They're trying to grapple with not dealing with that fear. And when some people experience it and others see that, they know that, oh, that's what writers have to go through. That's what I might go through down the road, big if I get that far. So they start hedging their bets. They start, easing forward. They start thinking, well, like, I don't want to end up like that person way over there. Way over there. I don't want to be like them. So what can I do now for my step? I'm on step 2. They're on step 30. I don't want to end up where they are at step 30. So what can I do at step 2 to make a difference? And what they decide to do for whatever reason, and I'm not really sure why, but what they decide to do is try and change their story, change their art. And they take this word, they take this concept, and maybe you've done it. I know I've done it, but maybe you've done it. They take this word and they put this word up on a pedestal. Where's my camera? Up here on a pedestal, right? And then they use that as some kind of watchword, some kind of shibboleth, some kind of passcode, some kind of magic lens through which everything gets filtered. And they're using the word wrong. And they're using the idea wrong. And it's fucking their shit up. I don't know how else to tell you this. It's the thing that's holding them back. That word, by the way, if you're willing to guess, feel free to guess while I get a mouthful of tea. hang on. Mouthful of tea first. Feel free to guess the word I'm going to talk about. Okay. Relatable. They use the word relatable. Well, perfection is related to it. We're going to get there in a second. But they use the word relatable. I need my story to be relatable. I need my character to be relatable. I don't want to have a character people can't relate to. I want a character, and here's where the word warps. Here's where the idea goes right off the rails. Because they start taking relatable and making it somehow a synonym of likable. I want a character everybody likes. I want a character that's relatable. As if those two things are synonyms. Those two things are not synonyms. They are not synonymous. You can't hot swap one or both of them out. They're two different things. I'll say that again for the podcast. They are two different things. And then we get to this third part because they go, okay, well, it's not the same thing, John. Fine. Oh, okay, I get it. They don't get it. But they also, in their quest to make a relatable character, to make a character that everybody likes, they decide somehow that the thing that everybody likes about a character is that they succeed, that they do shit, that stuff happens. And that is a very elementary, simplistic, I would even go so far to say juvenile and immature. Because if we're going to swing for the fences, let's swing for the fences. A real base sense of what a reader reads a character for. Relatable is not the same as nice, as everybody likes. And it's not the same as successful. If you are out there crafting your character around the idea that, well, I just want everybody to like them, you are stunting your character. If you are crafting your character in such a way that, you know, they always seem to be succeeding at things, you are hobbling your character. You are putting, squishing them into a box, trying to make it work. Because this whole swirl of ideas gets fed upon or feeds upon and produces and then cycles around and around. The whole idea of perfectionism. The idea that you need to say a thing, tell a thing, do a thing, and write a thing so perfectly, so flawlessly that everybody likes this character, everybody likes this book. The minute you flip that switch, the minute you go in that direction, do you know what you're saying? Like you know what that is, right? That's not I'm making the best art I can. No, that's you and capitalism hanging out together. Because the question comes down to, why are you making the character that everybody likes? Why are you making the book the way it is? Almost invariably, eventually, the answer comes, well, because I want to sell a lot of books. I want a lot of people to read it. Okay. You could have just said, I wanted to make money with my art. But people don't equate their perfectionism with that. They equate this idea that if we don't produce a thing without flaws, somehow it means we aren't good enough, which is horseshit. And I want to spend time this afternoon, this evening, now, talking about that. Because, and we're going to bring the graphic back, hey, your character doesn't need to be perfect. That's a big deal. Because if we're going to use the word everybody puts on the pedestal, let's use it correctly. Relatable. What does that mean? Don't give me a dictionary definition. The ability to relate is the ability to see yourself in something else. What does that mean? Well, that doesn't mean like, oh, that's me exactly. Like I'm looking past the camera at the monitor, right? That's what I look like. That's a representation of me. I can relate to that image because when I move my hand, it moves the hand on the screen, whatever. It's not just about seeing an exact duplicate of yourself. It's about understanding that in your characters, in your world, in your stories, in your movies, in your film, in your sex work, in your soap, in the baskets you weave, in the hats you make, in the art, in the book covers you draw, whatever the hell creativity you're outletting. People are looking for something where they can see some part of themselves in it. Now, on some hands, sometimes, in some ways, that's representation. People are looking to see themselves or someone like themselves in the book, whether that's racial or gender identity or sexuality or belief in faith or class or whatever. They're looking for some element of their own lives, making some kind of appearance, some kind of recognition in that art. But it goes beyond that, because most people try to solve that problem by having the character do something. If my character is just busy, I'm ticking the box with a little golf pencil. Tick. Oh, they have a job. You have a job. Tick. Oh, they have a family. You have a family. Tick. Oh, they're a biped. You're a biped. Tick. Over and over, these small, insignificant, cosmetic levels that are somehow quality representation, quality relatability. The reason we are moved by characters, be they superheroes or every people's or people from a far-flung past or future, is not because they also wear socks and I wear socks. It's because something deeper than a cosmetic level resonates with me. When you understand that, when that makes sense to you, you stop telling art, you stop creating stories where people just do shit. And I don't mean like paralyze your story with a complicated hyperplot or make like a million bells and whistles and everything's this weird Goldberg machine or this strange stack of house of cards that when the wind blows, the whole thing topples. It's not what I'm talking about. What I mean, what the important thing here, the thing I want you to think about is the idea that when you make whatever it is you make, whatever kind of story it is, fantasy, science fiction, romance, whatever, your reader, be they one person who's getting the book for free or 10,000 people who are going to pay $1 for it, whomever, your reader is always looking for themselves in the story. If you understand that to mean that your characters have to be that person, you have misunderstood the point I'm making. You can have your fantastic characters. The reason, here's an example. The reason I can relate to Superman is not because, much like the last son of Krypton, I too can fly thanks to the power of the yellow sun. The reason I can relate to Superman is that I see the idealism. I see the potential. I could be like that. I could be that kind of good person if I'm willing to put in the effort. I could be that courageous if I'm willing to put in the effort. If I watch a story about someone in the working class or someone struggling through, abject poverty, I can relate to that. These are my conditions around me. I don't care if they're a ranger in some medieval fantasy kingdom. I don't care if they're, a detective down on their luck in the 1930s. I'm looking for some part of me that is beyond the cosmetic that I can see and go, I know what that feels like. Feel is the key word here. Moving in on the camera for this one. Look, right here. Feel is the operative word. Now, there's a question over here in chat. The themes rather than the character. You're on the right course with the question. Theme is important. This is why theme is important. Theme is the relatable thing that I can take from the story and install in my brain. But themes are made from character stuff. Themes are made with plot stuff. Themes are made with world stuff. But the theme is the treasure at the end of the story rainbow. And when you shape things in a way that doesn't facilitate the creation of a theme, like you just have characters doing shit, and you don't really have a theme, the reader doesn't relate. I don't care what kind of story it is. I don't care what kind of character it is. I don't care how many cool supernatural bullshit horseshit powers they have. Doesn't matter. They could turn into a duck for all I give a shit about. If the reader can't go, I can connect with this person. I don't care if they're a fantasy creature. If I can't connect with them, it doesn't matter. Your character is the conduit for your reader to connect with your art. What are you trying to say about your reader via your character? You have this character. You have a fantasy hero, a child of prophecy, an overworked person who's not looking for love, yet love finds them. What message are you trying to get across to your reader? Other than, oh gosh, isn't this scene funny? Isn't this superpower really cool when you imagine it? What do you got to move them? Remember, this is the art. We're making art. How are you going to move them? Just by having a really cool explosion on page 11. I'm not saying this because the explosion on page 11 is bad. You get that, right? Like this isn't just a general like condemnation of writing cool stuff. It can be cool. You can blow everything up on page 11. I don't care. Just you can do all that stuff. Absolutely, you can. But making your character in such a way that you make it difficult to relate makes your art harder to click with, harder to connect with. It might be more technically perfect, meaning you have proficiently written all the sentences and put all the commas in the right place and all your dots and semicolons and all that shit is correct. But if the reader doesn't click with it, what does it matter? I'm not bringing this up tonight to get you afraid of your work. I'm not bringing this up to get you to question the motivation you have in telling your story. I am imploring you, challenging you, asking you. If we stripped away the cosmetics, if we just stopped making cool, superficial scenes where, oh, there's a gunfight, oh, there's a car chase, oh, there's, a turkey dinner. What are you really trying to say? And by extension, why are you electing to say it in the way you're saying it on the page? I talk to a lot of writers. I talk to a ton of writers. Do you know how common it is that people want to craft a character that's just the bestest at all the things? And every time, I don't care whether it's a kid's book, a picture book, a big giant fantasy novel, a sci-fi epic, whatever, time and time again, for some reason, they make these characters that are so removed from the potential experience of the reader and so devoid of anything the reader can grab onto that really it's just hundreds of thousands of words of characters accomplishing things. It's not even like a popcorn read where it's just sort of empty calories, and at the end of the book I just say it's done and I put it down. It's a waste of time. You just wasted your reader's time. You didn't connect with them. You didn't move them. You didn't leave an impression. Yeah, you wrote a book. Good job. But you didn't make art. And that's the opinion. That's the thing, by the way, that gets me, just crucified and kicked around. Because I'm a guy who will tell you how to do it. I'm a guy who will rail against a lot of systems. But I'm also the same guy who will tell you that you got to get up there and move somebody. And I don't care whether you're writing the smuttiest smut that ever smutted or whether you're writing, deeply technical nonfiction. You got to move somebody. That's the whole point of doing this. And your perfectionism. And the perfectionism you feel and the perfectionism you generate is in the way. Big in the way. Hugely in the way. I want to talk about that too. But first, mouthful of tea. I have no sponsor tonight. I have no ad copy. I was trying to come up with a joke for ads. Couldn't come up with one in time. But all the same. So just imagine a joke here. Ta-da! All right. Back to this. See, when I talk about this, I get all fired up, right? I'm trying to keep it mellow. I've had a long day. So I'm trying to like monitor the blood pressure, right? And I get real fired up about this because this is that one of those confluence moments where the intersection of art and product happen. And you can tell a lot about writers, about where they fall on this line, about how prepared they are, about how conscious they are of it. And it's not an easy topic because it is to some degree confrontational. You have to sit down and figure out how you feel and then figure out how you feel in relation to how I feel. And I'm not demanding that everybody adopt my point of view, which, by the way, it would be rad if the rest of the world adopted my points of view. I think things would run a lot better, certainly in some areas. But this is not me trying to, ablate your point of view. I want you to have your point of view. I want you to have your thoughts. I'm just trying to light the fire to get you to have them. When I talk about this stuff and I get all fired up, people go on the defensive. They jump on that back foot. Because all of a sudden now I'm somehow suggesting that they're shitty writers. Okay. I'm looking down at my feet because it seems like, it really seems like sometimes my shoes fit. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, they fit real good, that shoe does. Yes, there are some bad writers out in the world. And they are commercially successful. Who are they? I don't know. You'll find them. This isn't a blame game kind of thing. It's a recognition that when we divorce the art from commerce, commerce still wins because for some reason, comrades, we still think capitalism is a great idea. But I want to take us back to art, which means when I talk about this stuff, people get hella defensive because I'm attacking your ability to produce art because you got to get better at it. So they tell me this thing. Now, maybe one of you have said this to me. Maybe you've said this to somebody else. I don't know. But they say this thing when I start poking their characters and poking their stories and poking their plots. It's just escapism. It's just escapism. It's just a book. Who gives a... It's not. Why are you doing that? It's just a book. Relax. Have a Coke. Just hang out. Yeah, I get that it's escapism, but that's not a permission slip to get you out of gym class. That's not an excuse to hand wave away your responsibility, because it's still art. I can escape into good art, maybe even better than I can escape into poor art, because I still have to grapple with whatever the hell it is you're trying to tell me in a way I can picture in my brain. I don't want you to make excuses. I want you to produce better work. I want to give you the tools to help you produce better work. And if you're going to hide behind the idea of, oh, well, it's just a book, well, then you're just somebody writing it. And you can abandon your dream of being the big published author and being the big success because that's what you're equating it to. You want to produce that work to the best of your ability, doing the best thing you can. You have a responsibility to move somebody. You're making art, for Christ's sake. You're painting your Sistine ceiling. You're demonstrating the beauty of a sunrise. You're moving somebody. That's a big deal. Don't sleep on that. Now, I say that, and once people are done getting defensive, they immediately lock up. They freeze. Because, oh my God, what am I supposed to, I got to move somebody. I'm just me. How am I, a writer of, insert whatever you're writing here, I'm just me writing whatever it is you're writing there. How am I going to move someone? I can barely figure out how to write dialogue. Okay, hang on. And they take that idea, that inadequacy, that sense of I'm not good enoughness. Yeah, that's how we're going to say it. I'm not good enoughness. And they try to buttress it. They try to like park up something to help shore it up with this idea of perfectionism. It's got to be perfect. I'm such a bad writer, such a bad person, such a problem, such a not good at this person That the only way I'm going to be good enough as everybody else is to just try and make it perfect. No. There is no perfect. Stop it. Your character doesn't need to be perfect. Again, if I had fancier graphics, there'd be like a little ball that bounces, because that always amused me in school. But your character doesn't need to be perfect. Your writing doesn't need to be perfect. Because when you try to strip out the imperfections, you are stripping out the things that help it be relatable. You are taking away the things that allow a reader to connect to it. I'm not talking about the application of rules and grammar like, oh, that's how a sentence works. That stuff has to be there. That's a given. You need those things in order to shape the art to begin with. And we can question the structure and the conventions in a different way. But in order to do that, in order to be the person who's like, I'm not going to use any periods. Well, first you have to demonstrate that you know why you're doing it, other than just you don't want to press a key on the keyboard. That's a high level thing. If you're having trouble finishing your first draft, period, I would not attempt to make some kind of profound avant-garde statement. I'd stick with what works. If this were a different skill or craft, if you were learning how to bake bread, I would not, for instance, suddenly get deeply enamored with any of those Instagram or Twitter videos where guys make like this massive dessert with like 45 different kinds of sponge cake and chocolate. It's okay to have sentences. It's okay to be, adherent to the rules. You can break some other rules later, but I'm not talking about grammar. That's not the kind of perfectionism I mean, nor is that a permission slip to just not give a shit about grammar. You need grammar. Grammar and language are the ways we facilitate the transmission of art from one person to another. We need those things. If you take those things away, how am I supposed to connect with your work? What I'm talking about is the building blocks of tension and dynamism and effect. The idea that you've left your fingerprints on your work because you, a human, are making things to be consumed by, presumably, other humans. And if your goal is to get, them, whomever they are, to relate to your work, then what you're doing and what you need to do is demonstrate that you are as imperfect as they are. In some cases, going so far as to lean in. Those imperfections, which are made manifest in your characters, which are made manifest in your world, which are made manifest in the development of your plot, those imperfections are so critical. Because I don't know if you know this, if you've ever met a perfect person, somebody who never seems to fail at things, who always has the right answer, who is never challenged, never tired, never weary, never stressing about this, never bothered about that, if you've ever encountered those people, then you know exactly how hard it is to relate to their experience and they to yours. But that's the kind of thing you're creating every time your main character gets through the plot without risk. And that's what you're saying it should be like for every character who can immediately solve a problem on the first try. That's what you're saying needs to exist in the world the minute your super soldier fights 60 characters in a paragraph and doesn't really seem to struggle. One of the things that brings me to this point, so right now, at the time I'm recording this, there is a huge, like a massive social media push to get people to watch The Batman, the new Matt Reeves take on Batman with Robert Pattinson. I've started recording it for Patreon, by the way. If you want to go check that out, that'll be out this week for the $5 and $10 tiers over at, where is it? It's up here. Patreon.com/John helps you create. $5 and $10 tiers, you'll get a copy Not necessarily a whole copy of the movie, but it'll be me talking through a 3-hour, Batman's 3 hours, a 3-hour breakdown. If not, it's longer than 3 hours. It's probably going to be longer than 3 hours. Breakdown of Batman and what makes Batman tick in this iteration. I'm impressed by it. And one of the things I'm impressed by this movie, other than the absolutely crazy use of light and visuals, it's a very pretty movie. It's a very moody kind of thing. I'm not really sold on the story. It feels really slow, but that's neither here nor there right now. But there's this moment early on, about 15 or so minutes in, I guess, maybe a little bit before, where Batman gets into a fight with a bunch of goons. And Batman, he doesn't get his ass kicked, but he does get hit a few times. And it does mess up his, what we in video games would call his fighting rhythm. You know, he starts launching into a combo and somebody drops an interrupt and then he's got to reset. Now, in any other context, Batman would rip through those dudes because he's Batman. But there's value in him being able to get punched. Because, I don't know if you know this, but in terms of being a psychopathic billionaire, Batman is not terribly relatable on that front. But in terms of being a human who got his ass beat by a bunch of people, that's far more relatable because perhaps you've been surrounded by a bunch of people trying to beat you to death. You'd get your ass kicked too. Relatability is everything. The idea that your character must be perfect because you don't want to feel afraid. You don't want the character to be disliked. You don't want the story to take too long or be boring. Speaks so much about how you perceive challenge and threat and skill and struggle in your own life that you have decided that relatability is not at a premium. And that's no, don't do that. See, Batman got his ass beat. Not bad. He wins in the end. He's fucking Batman. But at the same time, he gets kicked around a little bit. And then the scene moves forward and he goes on about his plot. But I thought that was really refreshing because when you go look at like any of the video game Batman or the cartoon or anything like that, he would have mowed through those guys. There'd be gadgets and there'd be doodads. And the next thing you know, there's like 5 guys laying on the ground. And there's a time and a place for that. But that's not a constant. And with your own characters, even if you're not making Batman, the relatability of that character is not their ability to just beat the holy snot out of 16 people. Their relatability is in their experience. The bruises, the cuts, the soreness, the tiredness, the drive, which means you have to go past the superficial. So let's say you've got a character. Let's say they're a shape changer, right? We're going to go with one of the real great, terrible cliches of writing. They're a shape changer, and they're immortal, and they're infinitely wealthy, and somehow they're in love with a regular person. You know, let's just paint by all the numbers right now, okay? Or they're an orphaned child of prophecy, and they're the only one who can save the kingdom, fight the school, blah blah blah, blah. Whatever. Find the most generic thing you want in the world. Is any of that relatable to you? Are you in fact a shape-changing person who's now suddenly in love with just an average humdrum person? Are you incredibly vastly wealthy? Also, if you are incredibly vastly wealthy with ridiculous amounts of money that you will never spend in your lifetime, help me out here. You know, I just right there. Give me a tip. Give me something. If you've got infinite wealth, come on. What are you using it for? Help me out. At least let me buy another light so I'm not sitting in shadow. How's that sound? But let's say you're crafting these characters. They've got all these little details. Oh my God, it's so exciting. They have this, they have that. How is the regular person supposed to relate to them? Your average reader in Dubuque, to the best of my knowledge, cannot change shape, does not have infinite wealth, and is not essentially immortal. Where is the relatability? your character does not have to be perfect. Nope. 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 Fingers. There we go. Sorry. YouTube, I apologize. Podcast people, that was me pressing all the wrong buttons, seemingly in sequence out of nerves. Back on track now. This relatability means you have to take a deeper look at your character, which means you have to take a deeper look at why you want this character to not be challenged, which means we need to talk first about challenge. What does it mean when we say your character needs to be challenged? Challenge isn't just the size of the obstacle in front of them, first of all. It's not more challenging that there's now 10 goons instead of 6 goons. It's the fact that there's any number of goons and the danger a goon can represent. Because I don't know if you've ever watched a typical action movie. All the bad guys wait their turn. So it doesn't matter if there's 50 of them, 2 of them, 30 of them, whatever. They all wait their turn. Now, I know they're trained stunt people and they're waiting their turn for the sake of filming. But the danger isn't in the quantity. The danger is in the risk they pose to the character. And if you demonstrate a character that is so hyper-skilled, so hyper-competent, and it's made worse when you make the character sarcastic or when you make the character world-weary, and they can have, snappy inner monologue, which is just going to weaken everything else. But it doesn't matter if you throw 6 guys or 10 guys if there's not going to be a problem. It's just going to take longer. Taking more time to accomplish a task, beating up 1 million guys, doing this, robbing a bank, blah, 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 whatever it is, does not necessarily mean it's more of a challenge. It just means that it took more time. Challenge for a character is using a skill that they are not hyper perfect in, using a skill in a situation, in a circumstance that is not idealized, and there's a chance for failure. Imperfect skill under not ideal, in not ideal circumstances with an increasing or variable chance of failure. That's what a challenge is. Because if you ask somebody to do something they're amazing at, and you ask them to do something they're amazing at in absolutely perfect conditions, yeah, there is a quantum mathematic chance that they'll fail. So if you ask, pick any NBA pro player, and you give them a quiet stadium, and you put them on the free throw line, and you give them an infinite number of basketballs, they're going to make quite a few free throws. They might miss some, but by and large, they can stand there and swish them all day. If you were to ask a sprinter to run from point A to point B in ideal conditions with minimal resistance on perfect soil, indoor or outdoor, they're going to be able to do it. Challenge has to modify those things. It's not hard for them. The reader presumably has some amount of difficulty, and the way we encounter that difficulty needs to be expressed in the characters. Like Vegeta trying to go. Now here's the thing in chat. Like Vegeta trying to go Super Saiyan because he has not, but he can't because he has nothing to lose. Well, that suggests that Super Saiyan can only be created by somebody or reached by somebody who has something to lose. If that's the point you want to make, that through loss we're able to reach these super heights and become essentially Aryans, sure. But it's a challenge. So let me think of a good, sports movies are great for this. Rocky. So he's a leg breaker. That's what Rocky is at the beginning of the story. He beats people up for money. And he is picked as a know-nothing, win-nothing guy who gets a big title shot up against the champ. Now, in perfect conditions, if he were to train perfectly and have all the access to all the material, he'd do okay. But it's because it is a challenge to him, and not just a punching, running, cardio, shirtless challenge, but a challenge of who he is as a person. Is he that goon or is he this boxer? Can the underdog win? Because there's underlying material underneath it, there's a challenge as to whether or not he can beat Apollo. You have to let your character possibly, if not sometimes necessarily, fail. If your character never fails, yeah, it might take them a while. What's the reader supposed to connect to? The attempt or the end result? We always seem to rush to the end result. Oh, he's got to defuse the bomb. It might take a while, but he does it. Well, taking a while is only part of a challenge. It's the risk. It's that sense of the unknown variable scale of how hard it is, and the not ideal. I'm still trying to find that word. The not ideal conditions that complicate things, the consequences, the looming threat of it. It's not just, I just have to keep doing the math problem until the math problem is solved. It's not only about time. You have to challenge your character, which means once you understand what a challenge is, you have to build a character that can be challenged, because your story is being absorbed, consumed, interfaced with, whatever you want to call it, by people who themselves get challenged, have rough days. Now, I know I make fun of those stupid writing prompts because most writing prompts are worth hefty mockery. But the idea of like, what would your character do for a holiday? First of all, no one gives a shit. But in terms of what that potential can be when you actually explore it, forget sharing it on social media. No one gives a fuck, Diane, about your character. The idea is, how does your character handle this situation? Think. What would they do? What would be the problem? What would be the success? What's the risk? What's the reward? You've got to conceive of every scene, every situation where the character has to make a choice or take an action. So, well, every scene. Not only what's driving the character forward, their internal personal drive, but the greater sense of what are they afraid of? This is why when we build characters, we ask about fears and we map out skills and we think about how to make things tick beyond just this is what my character can do. This is what they have to do. Now they're going to go do it. You've got to get under the surface. This matters because perfect characters are boring as hell. They're hard to relate to. They don't sell particularly well. So if you want to talk commoditization, if you want to talk about sales and capitalism and algorithms, perfect people are boring as shit. Go on social media, go look at any celebrity, go look at any person, whether or not, it doesn't even matter if they're like a bad person. Just go look at how people talk about others. Trying to pull them down, trying to poke fun, trying to pick a fight, trying to argue for or against them, whatever it is they're saying, right? That matters. That idea. We're all imperfect. Why can't your character be equally imperfect when you're trying to interact with other imperfect people? I'm not saying you need to, grossly and profoundly affect them in some problematic way. Oh, I'm gonna radically change my character by giving them some problem. There's a thing in gaming called min-maxing. And this is particularly a problem in systems where you build characters using points. So if you want to make a character, let's say, that can be invulnerable and can fly and shoot laser beams out of their face, that might cost 200 points or something. In order to have enough points, you often end up with weaknesses or flaws in your character. And of course, the more profound the flaw or weakness, the more points you get back. So you can min-max a character who can fly and is invulnerable and shoot fire out of their eyes, but you've also got somebody who is you know, cripplingly agoraphobic, afraid of heights, and allergic to cotton. I'm trying to pick like dangerous, problematic phrases. Mostly, apparently, at least in the early 80s and 90s when these systems were very popular for making characters, it was really common to just be disgusting with mental health and just sort of ablative with these things and completely misrepresent them. But somehow you could end up with, uh, a bipolar, a bipolar disabled character who could fly and shoot laser beams out of their face, but you had to, remove a limb and not explore their mental health in order to get the power you wanted. That's prioritizing the positive power over their actual flaw. It's a very disgusting and misunderstood element for creation. Flaws aren't there just to make the better stuff look good. Your character flaws aren't the source of punchlines. Your character's flaws aren't just these, oh, by the way, I guess I got to have these things. They're fundamental. To do this well, I'm going to move for a second because there's a cat. Sit on me. Move, would you? Thank you. To understand how critical this is, to understand how important this is, to understand how much of a big deal this is, you have to consider what flaw your character has and how that becomes sort of a crack in the lens through which they view the world. Romance writers trying to make this, that's how you get the I have stubble, therefore I have a troubled backstory. That's that trope. We don't want to do that. We don't want to only do that. But it's the same idea. We just want to make it, better than that. Your imperfect character needs to engage with the world because of, despite, in spite of, alongside, whatever issues or flaws they have. You don't necessarily need to make the flaw the B plot. I'm not saying it has to be this one-to-one, here's my flaw, therefore here's my story kind of view. Like, it's not, we're not children. We don't need to think about things in such simplistic, literal ways. I'm saying that you need your character to have flaws, and you need to be willing to explore those flaws for the sake of developing a better character, which means you need to understand their flaws, which means, here comes the tricky part, you need to think about your own flaws. Your own flaws. You, the writer. Because what better expert do you know on flaws than looking at your own, because you have them all the time. They're in you. So what are your flaws? And you can push that as uncomfortably forward as you want. A lot of writers, when presented with this, will run the other way. Holy shit, will they run the other way. You want to watch excuses bloom like flowers. You start talking to somebody about their flaws and start asking them how to push their characters forward and how to do more than just have really cool, neat, explodey scenes. You're going to find somebody who's unwilling to confront their own perfectionism or not deeply confront their own sense of inadequacy. You carry these flaws. They don't mark you as a bad person. They're fuel for your art. You're not trying to make this art so that you're suddenly a better person, because you're not going to chase the approval of people who you can't control. But you're examining these flaws because you see them in yourself and you see them in others, and maybe other people do as well. And it is because of this flaw and through this flaw that you can craft a story people get moved by. To put it in plain, simple terms, you're a fucked up person telling fucked up stories that other fucked up people can relate to. That, in that sense, you're not a bad person. You're just you, and they're just them, and your character is just your character. It's okay if everybody's got bumps and bruises and dents, and it should be on a mug. Fun fact about my merch, the merch with profanity never sells well, but it should be on a mug. Anyway, hang on. I want to see if this works. Or is it? Hang on a minute. I'm typing. One of these used to do it. I will look up later which one it is. Anyway, there is a store. Maybe I disabled it. I don't know. I'm off topic now. I'm going to get back on track. So bear with me while I get back on track. Sorry, podcast people. I got detoured. My bad. You've got your flaws. Merch one works? Cool. Merch works. Okay. You've got your flaw. Why not exploit it? Why not explore it? Why not do something with it? For a lot of people, that means you got to sit in an uncomfortable space, trying to reconcile things, come to terms with things, figure things out. A lot of people don't want to do that. A lot of people want to make a thing that is so removed and so distant from their, from the flaw, from their thing, from the thing they're afraid of. They're not willing to work through their shit in their art. They want to avoid it, so they'll just go make this art. But it's that very thing, that very flaw, that very problem that allows you to speak and connect with someone else. So let's suppose, hypothetically, you're somebody who, let's see, you're somebody who's deeply afraid of connecting to other people because you feel you yourself are terribly inadequate. You think you're just not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not attractive enough, you're not strong enough, you're not whatever enough. You feel like you should go live under a bridge and everybody else is always better than you. And you don't deserve to be around people because you should be under a bridge. You know this feeling. You feel it every day. You carry it with you no matter what it is you do. Sometimes you hide it when you smile and make jokes, and sometimes you hide it when people are asking how you're doing. But you know this feeling. It lives with you. It is essentially a second shadow to you. You can speak to it probably better than people who have a vague understanding. You have a very intimate understanding of it. Why not put that in your art? Why not put words to it? Those words have the ability to possibly excise, remove, banish, whatever you want to say. You could work on it a little bit. Now, granted, some of this isn't just going to be solved by you telling a story about ninjas and bears, but it can at least maybe move the needle a little. It can at least make a difference a little. Some people hear that and interpret it to be that they have to have some kind of profound existential crisis in every single piece of their art. No, you don't need to. I mean, you can. That's a thing that's possible. Wouldn't recommend that. It's exhausting. But you should be willing to mine that part of you. The same way that you are willing to sit there and be creative and, oh my God, what cool shit can I have in this chapter? You should also be willing to plumb the other side of the coin. How deep can I go into myself? How can I put words to the thing that makes me uncomfortable so that maybe somebody else who's also uncomfortable with it knows they're not alone? If you're unwilling to do that, if that doesn't sound like it's very interesting to you, that's fine. Really, it's okay. You don't have to do that. I wish you would. I wish you were willing to push and challenge yourself that way, but I can't make you. I can just tell you, it's a really good idea if your character doesn't need to be perfect. I can't relate to a perfect character. The reader can't relate to a perfect character. We don't envy them, or if we do, it's very short-lived. Because eventually we feel like their goal, their life is unattainable. And the idea of fake it till you make it doesn't really apply if the story you're telling is so removed from the reality we experience. Here is an example. I was once told, when I was having a profound existential crisis about the nature of what it is I do and who I am, I was told that the thing I need to do in order to figure out what I wanted to do, I should read Lord of the Rings. Fine. Okay, sure. I can read Lord of the Rings, no problem. They're over there on that shelf. Super easy to do. and that I should take from this story the sort of the whole character arc for Aragorn, and that if I was just more like Aragorn, I'd be able to come to terms with who I am. I'd know who I am. I'd feel better, and I'd be able to go on about my day with renewed vim and vigor. And that didn't do anything. I mean, it took me a week to go through all three of those books and really take apart the arc. And I mean, it was very helpful in being able to talk about the arc and talk about the character structure and sing to a horse. But by and large, it didn't give me clarity of my own problems, because I am not, you know, the once and future king. I am not the man escaping his past in a profound way. I am not leading a ragtag found family of fantasy people across a mythical kingdom to defeat a big flaming eyeball. I'm a guy who's wondering if what he does makes a difference profound enough that, you know, he'll be able to buy groceries this week. Yes, it took me a week to read all three, because it was pretty much a day or two per book. It might have been 8 days, but I pretty much tore through all three of them in a week. The big illustrated ones, because I had time. I didn't have any work that week, so I had plenty of time to sit and read for hours. It's interesting that that's the part you got hung up on, not the deep part where whatever, it's fine. The idea being, though, that if the idea of figuring out your place and figuring out how you relate to your art and figuring out how others can relate to your art can't be hand waved away with a trite piece of saccharine advice. So we talked about challenge. We need to talk about skill, because that's sort of inherent in challenge. It's related. You don't want to build a character that is solely and primarily existing in the story for the purpose of delivering 1 to 3 basic skills. You know, I'm the world-class brain surgeon who's only in the story and the plot revolves around world-class brain surgery is interesting, not because they can do the world-class brain surgery. They're already a world-class surgeon. But it's interesting because what's the other side of that skill? The chance for failure. Doing a thing, having a skill, being able to do that skill is not interesting compared to your readership who might not have that skill. That novelty of things, oh, he can do that thing I can't do, is so short-lived that it's there for the first time something happens, maybe the second time. But if your character is going to be performing this skill over the course of the whole goddamn story, it's not going to be cool because they can do it. It's going to be cool in its application. So if your character can shoot fireballs, yes, the first time the character shoots a fireball, that's amazing. Wow, I wish I could. The 70th time your character shoots a fireball, it's the context in which that fireball needs to be summoned or shot, because the novelty of it has long since worn off. When you craft a skill for your character, and I don't care whether they had a cool-ass training montage or not, when you craft a skill for your character, you've got to think about not just the performance of it and not just the context of it, but the reason for it. Why do they have this skill? Whatever the skill is, shoot a fireball, do the crane kick, triple deke in a hockey game. What's the skill? What are we trying to do? Why do we have to do it? And if your answer is always, well, it's the plot. Where's my big camera? See this face? That's what happens. When you solve your plot problems just by doing a skill your character can always do, it's not as engaging. If the main drive in a story is to follow John, the guy who talks about writing for a living, if the big challenge is to talk about writing for a living, you have to have a proportional challenge alongside it. Otherwise, it's just John having a Monday or a Wednesday night, or a Tuesday afternoon, or a Thursday, or an all-day Friday kind of a thing. Your ability to have the skill and depict it visually or imaginatively is nice. But why are you doing it? What do you want to get across to the reader? Not just the, hey man, picture this in your brain. But beyond that. Go beyond. Go past that. Why does this character have this skill? Why does the character not have all the skills? Why does this character have this problem? Why does the character not succeed here? Other than it's just more interesting. Your character, where's my graphic? Your character doesn't need to be perfect. The skills you give them do not all need to be 100. They do not all need to be S pluses, video game friends. They do not all need to be maxed out, super highly proficient. It's less relatable. It's less interesting. You ever have one of those friends where they seem to be an expert in everything? Maybe you're related to somebody who was an expert in everything no matter what they talked about. Even random shit. My father was like that. You could talk to him about something and he's an expert in it. You could tell him about something in the news, well, he would be able to talk for 25 minutes about this topic. You know how irritating that is? You know how quickly that sort of seals off and walls off conversation when the person you're talking to is an automatic expert? If two characters talking is an extension of reality and they're supposed to sound like people, but somebody's an expert and they've launched into yet another monologue to talk about their expertise, would you want to talk to that person? Think about your skills. Think about your challenges. One more thing. I know we're wrapping up early. I apologize. It's one of those things where John found all his thoughts and condensed them down and didn't ramble so much. But we'll do one more thing. Failure. We interpret, for whatever reason, hint, it's social media. We interpret, for whatever reason, social media, that the opposite of hyper success is failure. We talk about it in terms of sales. Either we sell out the first weekend or we're a failure. Either we get accepted right away or we've failed. It takes one query letter or 100 or it's a failure. We get this or it's all a disaster. We finish this many drafts or it's all a disaster. But that also extends to the interior of the story, the work itself. The idea of our character either has to be great at things or disastrous at things, and it creates this. That's a very strange. Hang on a second. There we go. Creates a very strange kind of hyper reality, a strange bipolarity of extremes rather than that big ass gray area where everybody seems to be living. What happens if your character fails? What happens? If your response to that is, well, the story comes to a screeching halt, then you have fundamentally misunderstood the assignment. And that speaks volumes as to why your character always succeeds. You've made the plot contingent on perfection rather than developing a story. See, I screw up things all the time. I always plan every stream to be 2 hours, but here we are at an hour and 19 minutes, and we're basically done. Did I fail? No. Did I do as good a job as I wanted? I don't know. Do I think this will get in the 3s of views on YouTube? I don't know. Maybe. Who knows? But the idea is that there exists a state of story potential that's as interesting, if not more so, because the character didn't do everything perfectly. Failure exists. It isn't just the absence of success. It's just a different track down which the story can pass. It presents its own challenges. It presents its own consequences. It makes a difference. Why can't your character fail? Not like in the existential, like they can't fail. They're too driven. That's not what I mean. I mean like if they have to perform a skill or task, what happens if it goes wrong? What if they weren't perfect? Not like in the sense of, oh my God, that's now the B plot. I mean, it can be. It's a little simplistic. But what if they weren't the all-knowing, all-able, all-capable everything? People who get asked to that, they tend to jam up a little bit. They get all up in their head, and they, well, that's just not how it is. Yeah, what that reveals is that you're uncomfortable with the idea of being imperfect. Now, whether that's because you think the only way you're going to get accepted, loved, recognized, validated, or seen is to be perfect, I don't know. I'm not your therapist. But your character can have flaws. Your character can have issues and problems. And you need to be willing to explore them with the same facility and interest that you do when you explore their successes. Failure isn't the absence of goodness. Failure's just you didn't get a thing. The question and challenge comes in when failure is what's called either a known state or an unknown state. Here's what that means. Let's suppose you're you, just for the sake of this example, you're you and you're taking your driving test. Or you are passing some kind of testing for work. Let's suppose you get question number 5 wrong, whatever it might be. If failure is a known state, when you get question 5 wrong, let's say you're only allowed to make one error. You get question 5 wrong, you're done, the test is over, you know what you know, you're told what you screwed up at the time you screwed it up. When failure is an unknown state, like a driving test, you might make a mistake in the first 20 seconds, but you won't know until you go all the way through the test. The difference between those two things is that in one case, the whole test progressed. You had to go all the way through, and you didn't learn your mistake until you got to the end. Whereas when the failure happened and everything stopped short, you had to then proceed down a completely different and separate track to deal with whatever it was. You get to choose every time you craft a scene. You get to choose every time you make an idea or present a challenge, whether failure is known or unknown. It's not always going to be the same thing. It's not always going to be the same thing back to back. Sometimes it's different. Every time is a new, fresh chance. So maybe your character, in the course of accomplishing their plot, gets stymied part of the way through the story and has to completely change how they're going to plan on doing things. Failure is known, so they detour once they fail. Oh, I've got to go find a janitor in my apartment complex who will teach me karate so I can go fight the blonde kid. But maybe failure is unknown. I go all the way through this, and the real lesson I learned along the way was that I just needed to believe in myself so that I can kick the blonde kid in the face. These are all tools you find. These are all tools you can develop based on your own willingness to look at how you think about failure, how you think about challenge, how you think about character, how you think about success. Notice that we didn't really talk about what was right. We didn't talk about what was good enough. We didn't talk about what was commercially viable, because that's not a thing. Like it's a thing in the sense that it exists, but it's not a relevant point to what we're talking about. It also doesn't matter in the long run, because what's going to be the best for your audience in terms of growing your audience, in terms of reaching your audience, in terms of having an audience, is your ability to produce whatever work you're going to produce in a way that it's relatable. And perfect characters are never going to be relatable so long as your audience is themselves imperfect. Your character doesn't need to be perfect. I can't stress that enough. You need to sit with yourself in the writing process. And in addition to making your cool scenes and making sure your characters have snappy dialogue and painting a picture with your words and getting a movie in the reader's brain, you've got to add depth to that movie. You've got to add depth to that story. You've got to have those themes. That's not just a thing that publishing is asking for, like it's the new hot trend. It's there because those themes, those imperfections, that evidence of a person making a thing that's going to affect somebody else helps the story be better overall. It's the reason why we remember those things that moved us so profoundly, and we barely remember the plot of stuff that was disposable. That's the point here. Which do you want to make? How do you get better at this? Well, good news. You get to just write more. Just write more. There's no other way to say it. This is all stuff within your control. It might take you a little longer. It might cause you to amend your plans. You might have to have one of those, sit down and confront yourself moments. But these are all things under your control. You can develop this stuff. You can get better at this. You just have to try. And you just have to question things. And remember, your character doesn't need to be perfect. I should have made this graphic bigger. But that's all I have. That's tonight. About 90 minutes. Not too shabby. Are there any questions, any issues, any comments, any etc.? I want to thank everybody for coming in, by the way. I saw a ton of people come in as I was talking. Hi, you're all wonderful. Thank you for being here. I was really worried it wasn't recording because normally previously when I record, there's a little icon that pops up. It didn't pop up. I was really worried that I was just talking to myself. So thanks for being here. It was wonderful. Questions, issues, anything? I know I just dumped a ton of heavier than typical stuff on you, but I think you're capable of handling it. If I didn't think you could handle it, we'd be talking about parentheses or something. What to write to make better characters? Yes. How do you make better characters? You make better decisions. So you take your character, whomever they are, right? Take a piece of, are you asking for a practical way to do this? Okay, practical way to do it. Here we go. You take your character, put their name on a piece of paper or whatever, or a Word doc or whatever. Put their name up top. Underneath that, write their goal. Their goal is they understand it. I want to do this. She wants to do that. Whatever. Frame it however you want. What's their goal? Okay. Character, name, goal, as they understand it. List a couple skills. Here are the things that they're going to do, both in terms of what they already bring to the table as well as what they're going to learn. It doesn't really matter so long as you're able to compile some amount of skills. Okay? Past that, what's their arc? Drop down a couple lines, write their arc. They're going to start here and feel this way. They're going to reach this point and feel that way. They're going to reach this other point and feel this way. Then they're going to end. What is their arc? Again, this doesn't need to be whole big ass things. It can be phrases. It can be just 1, 2, 3, 4, make a numbered list, whatever is easiest. This isn't a deep, rigorous blueprint. It's just a note for you. And if you can verbalize or express in this arc what it is that you want them to grow from and grow towards, meaning, they're starting off as the insecure kid who, doesn't stand up for himself and doesn't believe in himself, to the kid who can karate kick the blonde kid in the face who believes in himself and has made a girlfriend and has a janitor who loves him. That, figure out who they began, figure out who they were at the start, and figure out who they are at the end and write it down. Figure out what they're afraid of. Figure out how they handle challenges. Figure out what makes them work. Figure out what they will avoid doing. Follow that up with, why do they avoid doing it? Get all that stuff down. Get it out of your head. Codify it somewhere on paper. I'm not saying carve it in stone. I'm not saying you can't change it in the course of writing. You absolutely totally can. But it's at least a starting point. It's at least fuel to begin with. Get that all down. Refer to that piece of paper. Refer to that document. Refer to that character map over the course of writing your scenes. And then just keep doing it over and over. Draft after draft. Book after book. You don't have to get this perfect. Here, we're coming in. You don't have to get this perfect in your first draft in your first book. You don't have to get this right in your 10th book. But over enough time, you'll get better at this. It just takes time and practice. And you've got to go beyond the cosmetic and superficial stuff of character development to get into who that character is as a person, and through what things, through what elements, through what ideas does the reader relate to your character. Because unless your reader is somebody who's gone through the exact plot your character is, you've got to find some ways, more than one, some ways that your reader can relate to them. You don't just want it to be, oh, well, they wear pants and I wear pants. Oh, they've also, I've encountered supernatural evil forces. They've encountered supernatural evil. So you need something that they can build a bridge to. Something that they can go, yeah, I'm looking forward to reading this book because I see myself in this character. When you get lost, when you end up in the weeds, come back to, how do I see myself in this character? How does a reader see themselves in this character? You're very welcome. It's a good question. Anybody else? I'm looking up because the skies apparently just opened up and it sounds like there's a shower going on my roof. Anybody else? Else we will get out of here. And I'll see you Wednesday. All right, let's hit that outro. Oh, I want to thank everybody for being here. There's no outro music. I don't know why I tremendously paused like there was going to be outro music. There's no outro on Monday. I should know better. If you liked this, by all means, feel free to let me know. If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the bell for notifications and do all the other YouTube things. That would be super awesome. If you're listening to this on your preferred podcast thing of choice, feel free to leave a review or a rating of some kind when possible. I do really appreciate it. I do get emailed them, and they do mean a lot, including the ones that are like 1 star, this isn't any good, thanks so much. If you want to support more stuff like this, if this, really was your cup of tea, or you want to dive deep into different topics, you can always make suggestions. If you want to support this in a more of a financial way, the best thing you can do is jump over to patreon.com/JohnHelpsYouCreate. The next time I'm here, the next time I'll be in your ears and in your face, will be Wednesday. So 2 days from now, let's see, that is the 20th, 420, the magic number, you guys. We'll be on 420 to have the writer's chat for the week, where I will be answering oodles of questions. They're going to go up on, by the way, they're going to go up on Discord tomorrow. And I look forward to seeing you then. Have a great night, guys. Thanks so much for being here, and I will talk to you very, very soon. Have a great night. See ya.